Trev's Hockey Show. I'm the Trev. It's too sweet. Anyway, continuing with retired numbers. Yeah, it's been a while since we've done a retired number. Almost a year, I think. But here's hoping this is the first of many. I've got 2 more that I'm writing that should be finished soon. All I have to do is write them up, record them, put them together. And those will be on the go. But here's hoping this is the first of many for this year anyway. But today's topic is another part 2. As in, this is a case of a player has his number retired by more than one team, even though the team in question here does not play in their original city anymore. But having said all that, if you haven't checked out part 1 and you have 40 plus minutes to spare, I highly suggest checking that one out. But today's topic really don't need an introduction. Up to this point in time, he was considered the best player in league history. Some say he still is, having set not just the bar in terms of longevity, but also as far as points, goals, and assists in a career is concerned. And although by this time, his glory days were well behind him, that's not to say that his time with said club today wasn't important. Today, we're continuing our talk about Mr. Hockey and his time in Hartford. Talking, of course, about the number 9, worn by Gordie Howe. Let's talk about it. All right, so Gordie Howe's 3 seasons with the Whalers begins while the Whalers were still known as the New England Whalers as part of the World Hockey Association. Now, Mr. Hockey had signed as a free agent with the Whalers in June of 1977, having played the past 4 seasons with his sons, Mark and Marty, as a member of the Houston Aeros, who managed to talk him out of retirement 2 years after he originally retired in Detroit. At this point, Howe is still a very productive player, having had 2 100-plus seasons and winning 2 Avco World Trophies in 1974 and 1975, as well as winning the Gary L. Davidson Trophy as league MVP in 1974. Now, interestingly enough, the Gary L. Davidson Trophy would be named the Gordie Howe Trophy in 1975. So a lot to be said when you're still an active player and you have a trophy named after you. That's pretty awesome. Now, the 1977-78 season would see Howe essentially pick up right up where he left off of the previous season. He played his first WHA All-Star game as a member of the Whalers, the 5th time he'd played in a WHA All-Star game at this point, and was pivotal in helping the Whalers finish 2nd in the WHA standings, leading the team with 96 points in 76 games played, which is also good for 9th in league standings, and 5 more than his son Mark, who'd finished 10th amongst league leaders. That's pretty cool. Now, in the playoffs, the Whalers would absolutely dominate the Edmonton Oilers in 5 games, outscoring the Oilers 23-9, before doing the same to the Quebec Nordiques in 5 games to advance to the Avco World Trophy Finals, where the Whalers would meet Bobby Hull and the Winnipeg Jets. And while the Whalers were dominant in their first 2 series against the Oilers and the Nordiques, the Jets really seemed to have the Whalers' number in this one, outscoring the Whalers 24-8 in 4-game sweep to capture their 2nd Avco World Trophy, with Howe adding 10 points in 14 games. Kind of sad, right? You're the team doing all the dominating, and then you get dominated in a 4-game sweep. Ouch. The 1978-79 season, which would be the last season for the WHA, would see Howe's production seem to dissipate, or at least dictate his pace, as this season would see him only contribute 43 points in 58 games, which was his lowest point total in the WHA. Now, he did, however, get to play in the 1979 WHA All-Star game with an up-and-coming kid named Wayne Gretzky. And it's fairly safe to say that because it was a WHA All-Star team playing Dynamo Moscow, it was good to get him that international play while you still could, right? Now, the Whalers would end up finishing 4th in league standings, which is good enough to make the playoffs. And in said playoffs, the Whalers eliminated the Cincinnati Stingers in 3 games before having an evenly matched 7-game series against the eventual Avco World Trophy finalists in the Edmonton Oilers, with Howe contributing only 4 points in 10 playoff games. So while not the most productive season, not like the season before, the Whalers were still successful, and thanks to that helped him out in the NHL-WHA merger. All right, so with the merging of the two leagues, the New England Whalers took the chance to rebrand the team as the Hartford Whalers, which really had a lot to do with the Boston Bruins, but that's another story for another time. And also with the merger, it gave every NHL team that lost players to the World Hockey Association the right to reclaim them, as the original teams still owned the players' rights. And even though Gordie Howe retired from the Detroit Red Wings back in 1971, the Red Wings still owned his rights. But fortunately, the Whalers and the Red Wings reached a gentleman's agreement that let Howe stay with the Hartford Whalers, based on Detroit's thought that his legacy in Detroit was still intact. It's not in jeopardy. It's nothing to worry about. So, play in Hartford. So on October 11th, 1979, Gordie Howe would begin his 26th NHL season, a record he would own for 30 years before Chris Chelios ended up tying him for it. And while this would be his last NHL season, he wouldn't stop making history, as October 11th would also see him pass Doug Harvey to become the oldest player in league history to play in an NHL game at 51 years old. On the topic of history, he would also play in his record 23rd NHL All-Star game, his first and only as a member of the Hartford Whalers. Ironically enough, played in Detroit, where he would receive 2 standing ovations. He had to actually skate to the bench for the crowd to stop, and then he'd come back on, and they would start all over again. But we're not done here with making history, as he would become the first player in league history to score 800 career goals, doing so on February 29th and scoring goal number 801 on the last game of the Whalers season on April 6th, ironically enough, against the Detroit Red Wings. I remember 801 stood as the mark for a long, long time. And even though he finished the season as a 52-year-old, Howe played in a full 80-game schedule, managing to add 41 points in the process, with the Whalers making the playoffs in their first season in the NHL. Unfortunately, though, this playoff run was very short, as the Whalers came up against the defending 4-time Stanley Cup champs in a row, the Montreal Canadiens, who had eliminated the Whalers in 3 games without contributing his last 2 playoff points in the process. So during the offseason, although Howe was still convinced he could play at the NHL level, he ultimately felt avoiding a decline in his performance at his age was probably for the best. And on June 11th, 1980, Gordie Howe would announce his second retirement from the NHL. And although his time with Hartford/New England did wonders for the Whalers, it also did amazing things to extend his own legacy to the game of hockey, as he would retire the league leader in games played, goals, assists, and points. Now, unfortunately, all these records would eventually be broken, but the fact that they stood says enough. But that's ultimately the story of the number 9 with the Hartford Whalers. So let's talk some numbers. All right, so if we're talking WHA stats, we got 134 games played with 53 goals, 86 assists, and 139 points in WHA. In terms of the WHA playoffs, that's 24 games played with 8 goals, 6 assists, and 14 points. Now, his NHL stats with the Hartford Whalers are 80 games played, 15 goals, 26 assists, and 41 points. Now, if we're talking the playoffs for the Whalers, that's only 3 games, a goal, and assist, 2 points. In terms of the All-Star games, he played in the 1978 and 1979 WHA All-Star game as a representative of the New England Whalers, and played in the 1980 All-Star game, his 23rd, which is a league record, as a member of the Hartford Whalers. He became the oldest player to play in the NHL. He became the first player to score 800 goals in a career in the NHL as a member of the Hartford Whalers. He also shares the record of most seasons played in the NHL with Chris Chelios. Again, a record he held solo for 30 years until Chelios came back. As mentioned in part 1, he was elected to the Hockey Hall of Fame in 1972. He was named one of the 100 greatest players in NHL history during the NHL centennial season. And when it comes to Hartford, he had his number retired on February 18th, 1981. Now, the rare exception when it comes to Gordie Howe's number retired by the Hartford Whalers, when the Whalers moved to Carolina to become the Hurricanes, all the other retired numbers went back to circulation. But the number 9 was not put back into circulation and does not have a banner in Carolina to represent the number is still retired. However, the Hurricanes understand the name Howe, the number 9. You've already retired it in one city. You shouldn't have to do it in a second, right? So in terms of the Hurricanes, this number is not in their circulation, and no Hurricanes player has come close to wearing the number 9. So as mentioned in part 1, Howe was the essential power forward in early terms of what a power forward was, and also such an important part of the teams that he played for. The Whalers were no exception. And although, as mentioned, his best days were well behind him by the time he returned to the NHL, his longevity, his desire to, or even his will to keep playing was so strong, it was so evident, and he had so much more in the tank. I mean, the shot was still strong. I mean, still being an ambidextrous scorer, you can never go wrong with that. Now, granted, a championship, even in the WHA, with the Whalers would have been awesome to see. He was still a solid reason for the Whalers' success in the last 2 seasons in the WHA, but also their first season in the NHL. And it's never a bad thing to enter the league as the Hartford Whalers with a guy like Gordie Howe on your team. Eventually, they would get Bobby Hull in the same season, but yeah, Gordie Howe, that says it all, right? I mean, it's Mr. Hockey. But that was essentially the story of the number 9 worn by Gordie Howe with the Hartford Whalers. Let me know your thoughts on this one. So that's another one of them Trev's hockey shows. I want to thank you for tuning in. Don't think I don't appreciate the gesture, especially if you've made it to this point. If you've made it to this point, well, congrats, my friend. You've made it to the end. And I'm very proud of you. I mean, granted, part 2 was not nearly as long as part 1, and that's probably a good thing, because part 1, as I said before, was a 40-plus minute video, and there was a lot of career to encompass when it came to Gordie Howe. But I'm glad we got part 2 out of the way. You know, I'm always for having the part 1 and the part 2 up at the same time. Some of them I have to wait because there's numbers in the way, but trust me, we'll get there. We'll get there. But anyway, if you've made it to this point, if you're digging what I'm doing, if you just want to say, hey, dude, I'm all for it, throw me a thumbs up. I mean, it helps out the algorithm a lot. I mean, on top of that, make it to this point, you're helping the watch time, which also helps the algorithm. If you want to, if you haven't done so by now, that red button, that one that says subscribe all over it, come on, you know you want to hit it. I know you want to hit it. The algorithm that I'm talking about knows you want to hit it. And why deny yourself a good thing, right? I mean, it'll make you feel good. It'll make me feel good. We're making that push to 500 by the end of the year. I mean, we tried that last year. See if we can't do it again this year. Let's help this guy out. If you really want, you want to go the extra mile, that link in my description below, that'll take you to my Facebook page. Feel free to join that. I'm seeing the number count climb up there. Hopefully, it'll match the number that I got here. I mean, it's never a bad thing. I would definitely appreciate the support from you there, too. I mean, I'm not a hard person to find on there. I'm posting quite frequently, so chances are you'll find me. So moving forward, as far as retired numbers are concerned, like I said, I got 2 that I'm working on, and I'm probably going to have another 2 that I'm working on before I get to those 2. But either way, like I said, hopefully I'm giving you a lot of retired numbers this year. I got a lot to catch up on, but either way, it's coming down the pipe, so look for it. I mean, either way, in the meantime, and in between time, be looking for more videos from Trev. Later.